So I have decided, as I tend to do, I like to decide things. So on the topic of like trying to hit that athletic, startup athlete performance in terms of peak performance, I've been looking into obviously flow. I'm gonna butcher the guy's name, Mikhail something 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 something. That guy, that Hungarian psychologist, I think. But yeah, so he obviously is one of the most prominent figures around the psychology of flow, of happiness, reaching peak performance, and what it takes to get there. And following him, there have been other works as well. And there's a guy called, I think it's Kotler, potentially Stephen Kotler, something Kotler. So he then talks about the 22 flow triggers. So I've been applying that now. And I'm trying to work out, so if I was to operate like an athlete, what would I do to optimize my day, my approach, my mentality, to make sure that I'm operating at my best wherever and whenever possible. So with that in mind, how would I structure my day to make that work? So with these 22 flow triggers, there are various aspects, and I'll link down below in the actual description. But the different triggers include things like internal triggers, external triggers, also talking about like there's the concept of group flow, which I won't get into for now. But for me personally, like the different triggers that really stood out for me from Kotler's 22 flow triggers, there are various things like challenge, right? And now that I'm coding, I am finding that I get stumped a lot. I'm sure I've done a course, and obviously I've got a computer science degree, which helps as well. Well, actually, it doesn't help at all. I've forgotten everything. But doing the course itself has given me a background in specific technologies like specific languages rather, like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So primarily front end languages. But even when I'm coding the stuff that I'm doing right now for the different features, I get stumped a lot, especially when it gets into the back end side of things. So with that in mind, it got me thinking like there's challenge as a trigger, but there's too much challenge, and that's off-putting, and that's one of the biggest interruptions to flow. So I'm thinking about like, right, how can I make the problem smaller? And with that in mind, breaking down the problem to a point where I'm like, okay, I can do this. And it's crazy. I tried that today. I broke the problem down to its constituent parts, down to granularity where I feel like, oh, actually, I can do this. Oh, actually, I can do that. Not like, oh, this is easy, I'll get bored doing it. It's more like, oh, I can do this. And it's relatively challenging, but enough that I feel like I know what to do. Just I'm not quite sure if I'm going to be able to pull it off. But then obviously I push through it and it works out, and I get that dopamine hit, which only reinforces the reward mechanism, and hey presto, more flow. So it's a virtuous cycle. So that's something that I think really appealed to me. The other concept was novelty, making sure that whatever I'm working on feels novel. Let's be honest, everything I do right now is novel, so I'm not complaining. The other thing it talks about is multi-sensory experience. So like trying to engage as many of the senses as possible is another way to engage flow. The routine for flow for me right now, get this, right? So I'm going to list out my routine. So 1, coffee. Like, I think that goes without saying, right? Coffee is obviously the first thing to kick off this routine. So I get my coffee, I get my headphones, strap them on, and I play some, ambient type music. These days it's all about epic soundtracks or, ambient movie soundtracks, game soundtracks as well, actually. There's a really nice soundtrack I've been enjoying lately, which is really chill, but also quite motivating as well. Nothing with lyrics, obviously. So that's helped. So headphones. So that's engaged not only my taste and smell, I guess, with coffee, and then audio with the music, and then obviously eyes, the task that I'm working on. So specifically the coding, for example. So yeah, there are different things that I'm doing, which essentially engage multiple senses. And also by doing that, it kind of triggers my brain into thinking, oh, this is flow mode. Right, let's get into it. I don't look at my phone. I put it somewhere where I'm not going to see notifications come up. I go into full on focus mode. So that's something that I do as well. And by doing these 4 things, my brain realizes, okay, it's time for flow. And then the other triggers, in fact, one other trigger that I'll talk about before this video gets way too long. I was tempted to do all 22 triggers, but I thought, do I really want to bore you guys when you can just read the article that I'll link down below? Don't worry, I'm not that mean to you guys. So yeah, the 4th thing that really stood out for me is risk, which is I need a level of risk. Everyone needs a level of risk to induce flow. A risk-free environment is not conducive to flow. And, they talk about flow for athletes, for military personnel, for example, like to get into the zone, sometimes you need, in their case, it could be physical risk, right? Like a surfer could fall off the board into like the deep ocean, like whatever, something that could really make them feel like, okay, my life is in danger. I need to focus. And it's a forcing function to get them to zone in. But physical risk isn't the only way to get flow. As it's been scientifically proven, you can do various other methods to impose risk: social risk, financial risk, emotional risk, etc., etc. And in my case, I guess by doing these vlogs, it's an element of risk. I'm putting myself out there and I'm saying I'm going to do things. So if I don't do it, there's like social risk there. So that is helping. So I guess you guys are helping me get into a flow state. But also I realize that there's a social risk that I can do here where I make promises with friends and colleagues to say, hey, I'll get that over to you, like I mentioned in the previous video. So that's another way of getting social risk as well. So I'm exploring other ways to develop more risk into my work to make sure that I let that instigate the flow that I need. So yeah, those are the things that stood out for me, and I'm finding they're really helping. The other thing that I've always done is the Pomodoro technique. So 25-minute bursts of flow, 5-minute break, 25 minutes, etc. But yeah, that's a classic. So I won't go into that. One thing that's not in that article, and that I think is important, is that the other challenge that I found is I have a habit of being constantly just switched on. I'm always overthinking everything. Like I will tend to think a lot. And I feel like even when I'm meant to be relaxing, I don't completely switch off. And I'm sure there are many folks who are watching this who can relate to this. And I think that can impact peak performance, because just like athletes at the top of their game know that right now they need to switch off, so that when they are switched on, they are on it. Like there is no diminishment in that peak performance because they've allowed themselves full recovery. So I'm basically using like those 5 minutes, for example, to make sure I switch off as much as I can. I literally ask myself, am I meant to be switched on right now or switched off? Like actually physically, or rather mentally ask myself that. So let's say if I'm walking around and I'm like, right, am I switched on or switched off right now? And if I find that I'm slightly switched on a little bit, I'll be like, hey, I should really, really switch off, So I turn it off. So yeah, I'm very bad at relaxing. And my friends know this. It's something that I'm always constantly trying to do something. I have to be productive, all that nonsense. So I'm trying to get on top of just knowing how to relax. So yeah, very important.